Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. I'm so excited for this presentation. I've actually had an opportunity to already see Tammy's presentation one other time, and I think that there's a lot to be taken from it. Tammy is the Retirement Market Insights Director over at OneAmerica. So she has a wealth of information that we're going to share with you. And if you have any questions, you can please type them into the box for your GoToWebinar, and I will make sure that we address them at the end. But I want to give Tammy all the time that she needs, so I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to her. Hi, Tammy.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we can go through some things that I think are going to be top of mind on your clients' list of concerns, and provide hopefully a nugget or two that you can walk away with today. So I'll just go ahead and jump right in. And this is our good afternoon notice from compliance, and we'll assume you're speed readers and move on. How's that? I like to always start out with the landscape, just because while most of us know it, we also, it's a good reminder to understand, how did 65, where did 65 come from? What's the magic age there? And the reality is that, for our parents or grandparents, 65 was developed because of Social Security's Act in 1935 that was created, and our parents and our grandparents basically were used to a Social Security benefit, health care, a gold watch if they worked for a great company, and maybe even a lawn chair, and off into the retirement they went. However, unfortunately today, retirement isn't exactly like that, right? It is a lot more complicated. Most of our clients do not have pensions. We're struggling to really balance the needs of maintaining a household, potentially taking care of, aging parents, and government programs like Social Security and Medicare can greatly benefit retirees, but they're also constantly changing and they're hard to stay on top of. So the average retiree is also taking significant debt into retirement, including mortgages that the generation before really didn't have. So we're really trying to find that balance, and of course trying to keep fighting for as much of our hard-earned money from Uncle Sam as possible as well. So all of those bring challenges, but with all the complexity also brings greater solutions. So hopefully today we want to arm you with a little bit of knowledge so that you can take a proactive approach with your clients to solve for, in my opinion, 3 key retirement risks and gaps that we'll have some dialogue today about. Also, we want to really start off with addressing life expectancy, which has grown significantly over the past century. And so when you think about how the average lifespan was really only around 61 years of age when Social Security was enacted, and 61 years of age, but yet you couldn't claim until 65, right? So, again, the reality is that it's a pretty big change from our parents or grandparents. And in fact, it's about a quarter of a century longer, right? So one way we want to optimize Social Security benefits and project healthcare costs is to really plan around the client's most likely longevity outcome. And obviously, if you're married, your spouse as well. So that's very important. And when you think about retirement, as it pertains to how much time we do spend in retirement, oftentimes you may be talking to clients and they will say, hey, I'm retiring on this date in this year. And the reality is that very few people are actually claiming when they thought. About half are still retiring between ages 61 and 65. But 18% of people even retire earlier. And the reality is, again, only about a third to a half of those actually retire when they plan to. So reasons obviously are sometimes vary from person to person. You could have been laid off. You could have taken time off to care for somebody that's elderly or a sick parent. And many people, unfortunately, have to retire early because of their own health problems. And at the end of the day, they also could have said, corporate America could have said, thank you for your years of service, but goodbye. And so America isn't always staying in the workforce as long as they want. Even though you see on the slide, you've got people working in their 70s and even 80s, the reality is of that data is that those are people that are just wanting to, not necessarily people that need to. So at the end of the day, This means that longevity becomes a multiplier of all of our risks in retirement, and we want to make sure that we don't run out of money, obviously. And so when you think about it and put it in context of a simple word picture like a mountain, if you were going to climb the mountain, many people would say the goal of the climbing a mountain is to get to the top, right? But the reality is that it's partially correct, but we also want to make sure that we get back down correctly. And so going up the mountain represents our working years, and while coming back down represents most of the time our retirement years. And we want to make sure that we get down with enough money in our pockets for our clients. So thinking about it from both the accumulation of wealth going up the mountain, and then obviously how to turn your wealth into income streams coming back down. So the reality is in order to do that, we really need an integrated approach to our retirement. And so an integrated approach really means that we've got to find ways to optimize Social Security benefits, which is extremely important cash flow stream in retirement. Having some sort of guaranteed income strategy to, essentially offset guaranteed expenses in retirement, having access to liquidity, and of course, preparing for potential health care needs and costs, including long-term care, which is pretty significant for and top of mind for most of your clients. Now, if we go back to that traditional retirement income stool that so many of us have grown to know over the years, we look at one of those legs as pension defined benefit plan, the other leg is Social Security, and that third one being personal savings and retirement accounts. Now, unfortunately, just most of our clients don't have one of those legs, which is the pension defined benefit plan. So I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried to sit on a two-legged stool, it's a little wobbly. And people are counting on those Social Security benefits, and personal savings and retirement accounts don't really look like they should for preparing for retirement. Now, part of that is because we obviously have seen a decline in the defined benefit space and more an increase in the defined contribution space. But we also know that means the employer is no longer helping us plan for retirement significantly or preparing and taking care of us as much as we are now responsible as individuals to contribute to that defined contribution plan and make our own retirement. The reality is we know people aren't necessarily doing that well at it. In fact, if you cite the most recent and most optimistic study out there by EBRI, that's more around $203,000 for someone entering retirement, which really, when you think about it, you may have recalled a television commercial a few years back where there was a lot of people walking around with a number underneath their arm. And the reality is the number is important, but what's really more important is translating it into income, and that's what most retirees just simply don't know how to do. So we know that $203,000 is only going to be equivalent to roughly about $6,116 a year in retirement. And so can any of your clients live on $6,116 a year? I would say it'd be pretty hard to do that. So we always want to make sure that we understand how it's not about the money, it's about the income stream we can pull off of it. So when you think about assets and your clients' assets, when you ask them what are some of those for retirement, many people will list their house first. They'll maybe say pension if they have a pension. They will pull out their defined contribution plan, and then they're going to cite Social Security. The reality is that Social Security is often one of the most highest benefits in retirement. For singles, it could be upwards to $500,000. For married couples, even $1 million. And what's important to note is that Social Security really is going to be one of the most valuable retirement benefits that you can have, because it exceeds how most people are saving on their own, right? So it doesn't run out. It keeps going as long as you live. And so, again, Social Security then becomes obviously very important. And when you put that into context of average savings, like we were just talking about $6,000 roughly a year to pull off that $200, well, the average Social Security benefit is $1,503 a month. Well, that's $18,000 a year. And so that's 3 times what people are typically able to save. So it becomes this huge important income stream in retirement. And for those that have been higher earners, their maximum Social Security benefit in 2020 could be $22.65 if they claimed early, $3,011 if they claimed at full retirement age, or even claiming at 70, almost $3,700 a month. But most people are simply not drawing that type of income. So for the purposes of today's discussion, we're really not going to dive deep into the rules or even all the available benefits because that's kind of its own presentation, but we do need to understand that Social Security does have rules. They have exceptions to the rules, and then they have these exceptions to the exceptions. And perhaps one of the largest financial decisions of your client's life, yet the Social Security Administration unfortunately has a mandate that doesn't allow them to give you advice on when and how to claim your benefits, especially in coordination with your other income sources. So most of us then look like this, both advisors and clients, right? So we're like, wait a minute, what do we do here? And in fact, $3.4 trillion is always left on the table. And in fact, that is equivalent to about $24 billion a year. And about 4% are only maximizing their Social Security manner in a way that benefits them. So that tells us that we have a lot of work to do with our clients. Only about, in fact, 96% of our clients are not optimizing Social Security in the correct way. So there's some staggering statistics here, which means we have a lot of opportunity to really improve our clients' cash flow in retirement with proper Social Security planning. So I'd like to go ahead and cover some basics around Social Security, such as when you're working, you're going to get 6.2% of your earnings are going to pay for Social Security. If you're self-employed, it's 12.4%, and that's up to 137.7 in 2020. Now, if you also have to qualify, which means that you've contributed to Social Security for 40 quarters or 10 years, or you're married to someone that did. And then some of the factors that obviously determine that benefit is your earning history when you claim and your longevity. So of course, question number one, always top of mind for your clients is, well, when do I claim? And the reality is the answer to that is it depends, right? They could claim as early as age 62, but they'd be receiving minimum benefits. They could wait until full retirement age and receive full benefits, or they could delay till 70 and receive increased benefits. But at the end of the day, the circumstances are always varied depending on your own personal finances and the rest of the retirement income story. But what is important to know when you're in this space is just key acronyms that are always used, like FRA and PIA. So they're important. So full retirement age, or FRA, stands for full retirement age, and it's based on the year of birth as shown here on this chart. Now, your full retirement age is very important because it's the age in which you can begin receiving 100% of your benefit, called the primary insurance amount. So your primary insurance amount is your actual benefit. So that's the money. It's the benefit that's based on your highest 35 years of earnings, though. So many people do confuse this and think it's their last 10 years or the last 35, but it's actually based on the highest 35. So what happens is sometimes we'll say, hey, what if we only have like 28 years of earnings? Well, how will Social Security figure your benefit? Well, unfortunately, Social Security still calculates the benefit on the highest 35, which means they're going to basically add zeros for 7 years, and that can reduce the benefit. So it's important to be cognizant of those earnings and making sure that our clients are going to Social Security at least to get the statement and making sure that their earnings history has been recorded accurately. We've had situations where they would bring a copy of their statement in and all of a sudden we have multiple years of zeros. Well, Social Security will correct them, but only going back so far. So this is a great opportunity. You always wonder and think about having Social Security conversations with your clients in their 60s. This is a great opportunity to have a conversation with your clients in their 30s and 40s because you have the ability to say, hey, we at least want to make sure these earnings are getting recorded so you get credit later on, and we'll make sure that we catch any kind of inconsistencies or anything wrong with the reporting structure early and often. So it's a great way to at least introduce the conversation. And then, of course, the other thing is that you want to make sure that we understand all the available benefits. Most people are familiar with how to qualify or what their own worker benefit, but there also may be other benefits that they have available to them, such as spousal benefits, ex-spousal, survivor, children, and young parent benefits. So again, this is all important to understand that there could be more benefits. Now, the one thing that I stress, and I have this slide in virtually every presentation I've ever done, is the power of patience. So if you were sitting across the table from your client and just simply said, Mr. and Mrs. Client, hey, would you want a check for $1,200 a month or $2,100 a month? I don't think you'll have any of your clients say, I'll just go ahead and take $1,200. Of course they want $2,100. How do I get $2,100? Okay, well, we need to have a plan in place to potentially delay benefits. And so in this particular case, we used a client whose full retirement age was 66 and their monthly PIA was $1,600, so just slightly above the national average. But when that client goes in to collect at 62 and it's early, they're only going to get $1,200. But in their mind, they think they're getting $1,600 because that's what their statement said at the top of the statement. But when you look at the smaller print inside, it says, hey, claiming early is going to be a reduction in that benefit. And so we really need to pay attention to this. This is where the challenge of having the Social Security conversation at age 62, the week before they want to go in and claim Social Security, makes it difficult for them to delay. So having the conversation early and often in their 40s or 50s is great because they can see the value of delaying and prepare adequately for that. So the other question that we also get is, well, you know, I want to claim right now because Social Security is going broke. So I like to set the record straight on this. And so my definition of broke is zero, zilch, nada, right? We're getting nothing. And that's not exactly the case. So in 2035, if nothing occurs, then benefits are only going to be paid out at 80%. So that's not exciting, but it's definitely not 0%. However, if you go back and you look at history, and looking at it pretty much on an every decade basis, you'll see the headlines that Social Security is going broke. What we forget is that the next headline is Social Security was fixed. And so the point here is that Social Security is truly a fixable problem. In fact, there are numerous legislative solutions out there right now to potentially fix the problem. One of them is increase Social Security tax rates. So at 6.2%, there's a proposal out there to raise it to 7.4% over a very long period of time, actually, and that will help shore up this system as well. Higher maximum earnings. So right now it's being capped at 137.7. Any amount earned over that, you're not getting taxed on. So that's another option. An increase in the full retirement age. If we think about it, remember we started this presentation with saying, hey, retirement was started out in 1935 with the age of 65. And in the last 80-some years, we've only increased the retirement age 2 years, either to 66 or 67. And so the reality is we probably could afford to increase that, seeing as if we're living 2 and 3 decades longer. So that's an option. Of course, we could decrease future benefits, and no one's excited about that. And those that actually vote are usually the people on Social Security. And trust me, they're not voting to decrease their benefits. There could be a reduction of COLAs or any combination of the above, of course. But if you were to implement either bullet 1, bullet 2, or bullet 3, or some sort of framework of those, it fully funds Social Security for another 75 to 100 years. So the point here is that rushing to claim benefits because of the fear that there won't be any money there is probably not a wise course of action. So instead, having your client sit down with you, running a personalized analysis and coordinating those benefits with the rest of the income sources is going to be far better guidance on when and how to claim the Social Security benefit. So we have to make sure that we're having those conversations. Now, that's not to say that you wouldn't want some clients to claim benefits early instead of delaying, but there's only a few circumstances in which that makes sense. And that's when we have a known illness that is really going to shorten life expectancy, or if we are just literally out of income options and this is literally to live on. So hopefully those are not the circumstances, but certainly wanted to point that out as well. We also want to make sure that we get this right. This is an irrevocable decision for the most part, because after you claim, your clients only have 12 months to make a change to their claiming status. And so if they decide to change, they could reverse it and within 1 year reimburse all those SSA benefits received. But after that first year, they're stuck with that election. Now, let's say you have clients that did make it, they're past the 1 year, and they realize they made a huge mistake, or perhaps they were downsized out of their job, wanted to make sure that they had income, so they started Social Security, and now their situation is looking brighter, and maybe they're going to do consulting work or pick up that second career. Once your clients get to full retirement age, they do have the ability to suspend their benefits all the way up until age 70. So if you're 66 full retirement age, you can still earn that 8% delayed retirement credit every year. And it's a great way to try to boost income for the longevity purpose. So thinking about how to make sure we get those that right is very important. So kind of recap on, Social Security, really you just have to have 40 quarters or 10 years. You're eligible for 100% of the benefit at full retirement age, decreased obviously if taken before, increased if after, based on highest 35 years. That's very important. Could be eligible for someone else's record. Social Security isn't going broke, and you don't outlive those Social Security benefits, and we always remind clients that they need to work with a professional who can help them optimize those benefits. So very important. Social Security shouldn't be made in a vacuum. It should be coordinated with all the other income opportunities. So that's kind of a closing out that Social Security section and leading us into health insurance, because while Social Security is likely going to be the largest decision that your clients need to make as it pertains to the retirement income strategy, health care is going to be an increasing concern from the expense side of retirement. And in fact, good health and financial stability are really the foundations for a successful retirement. So with recent healthcare cost increases, the attacks on the Medicare system, and rising healthcare cost inflation, and really at the end of the day, health and wealth and retirement are now and forever integrally linked. So since preparing for retirement, we all know, can be a daunting task, we want to make sure that we educate our clients in building and being proactive in establishing some sort of strategy that can greatly diminish one of their biggest concerns in retirement, and that's their ability to manage those healthcare costs and potentially the impact of long-term care as well. So I'd like to start out with essentially a quick cost comparison on entering into sticker shock, I guess, for most clients. So while general awareness, I think, of future healthcare costs is on the rise, what people aren't used to is that Americans are truly accustomed to only paying around 25 or 30% of their employer group plan premiums. So they often are shocked when they realize that they're having to obviously cover significantly higher healthcare expenses, which would include premiums and out-of-pockets, such as copays and deductibles. So as you can kind of see here from this cost comparison, even with the assistance of Medicare at age 65, the retirement strategy really should include a plan to pay for some substantial out-of-pocket healthcare costs as they go through the aging process. So taking time to understand that now is going to be much easier down the road. And also simply understanding, again, what is how healthcare costs are being driven. So it's always kind of a perplexing thought process on the price tag for healthcare, and how can we possibly identify what healthcare costs will be in retirement when we don't even know what we'll fall victim to, as an ailment, or what medications might be needed in the future that may not even exist today, or of course how long you live. So there is definitely data and software out there to help you with this, but it's important to have some sort of projection based on these key factors. So one thing I do like to do, though, is while not diving deep, at least cover the alphabet. So we do need to know our alphabet if we want to understand Medicare a little bit. And, again, it's our country's basic health insurance program for people age 65 and older, and obviously for people with disabilities as well. And so you're generally eligible for Medicare once you attain the age of 65. And original Medicare basically consists of Part A and Part B. Part A, you can see the key areas of coverage: hospital, skilled care, and hospice. What it doesn't cover is long-term care. And many people will say, oh, Part B has got the rest of it. It's got my doctors and tests. Well, there's a fee also to pay for Part B, and it doesn't really cover everything. So even though we have some good coverage, it does leave gaps, and that includes prescription drug coverage, long-term care, deductibles and copays, dental, vision, hearing, and foreign travel. And then the other model that's a lot, in fact, a third of the country is gravitating to, or actually first, let me cover this, to make sure that you have a holistic approach to Medicare. Many people will actually want Part D, which is your prescription drug plan. In fact, most people, that is where we start to see a soaring amount of costs in retirement, is the amount of prescription drug coverage. But then you have to have a supplemental plan, like or a Medigap plan, right? And that's kind of that mortar between the brick to really pull it all together and reduce some costs. But again, all these are premium based. Then the other model, though, is Medicare Advantage, and about a third of the country is going to this. So if you've ever heard Tom Hagna talk, he talks about retirement in 3 phases. You got those go-go years in the beginning, the slow-go years the next 10 years, and the last 10 your no-go years. Medicare Advantage makes a lot of sense, especially for go-go years. And so what we often see people do is preparing a line expenditure, in retirement for a much smaller out-of-pocket than what happens later in life. And so because it's very network focused, when you start getting into specialized care as we age, Medicare Advantage can be quite costly. And so just making sure that even if you are not selling Medicare, which I know a lot of advisors do not, make sure you're aligning yourself with someone who is very good at this process for your clients, so that proper cost projections can be included in the retirement income strategy going forward. So Medicare Advantage is just another model to be looked at. When you think about it from annual costs, look at it anywhere from, like, say, $5,400 to $6,000. Now, if clients are particularly healthy, and like, for example, even on Medicare Advantage, you could dial those costs down significantly. If they're particularly wealthy, they may have to dial them up. So that's something that we have to pay attention to, and we'll address that here in a little bit as well. But one of the things that you'll always get a phone call on is, hey, my Social Security check went down. And the reality is the Social Security check usually isn't going down. It's the health care that's increasing and devouring more of the Social Security check. In this example here, we basically included a national average for Medicare A, B, and D premiums, and a supplemental Medigap, as well as some dental premiums and vision premiums and some out-of-pocket costs. So with those, we came up for this couple $548,000 in health care. Now, if you present that number to your clients, it becomes analysis paralysis, right? It's like, wait, that's way too much. Can't even figure out how to pay for that. But just like we typically aren't going and pulling out a lump sum cash for a down payment or to purchase a home at $300,000 or $400,000, $500,000, we don't look at healthcare like that either. We want to look at it on those annual costs. But you just have to see how, if we look at this couple's Social Security benefits, how much it does devour it. And so one reason we want to optimize Social Security is so that we can get the most out of the benefit, because we know we're going to have increasing healthcare costs that will start attacking that benefit. And also, you can see even on this chart, that cost is not 61% in the beginning. It comes with age. So it starts out at around 43%. And ends up more closer to 83%, which you can expect as we age. The other thing to be very aware of is you may have clients that have done very good and are ready to exit corporate America. You know, they're ready to go fishing or do something different, and they want out at 60 or maybe even 62. Well, the reality is that we have to figure out what is our solution for Medicare or for health insurance in some way, shape, or form if we leave our employer-sponsored health care prior to 65. So the reality is that only about 25% of large companies even offer some sort of retiree health benefits. And so if there is no retiree health benefits, we have to look at things such as the exchange or potentially COBRA if that doesn't exist. And so it's very important for people that really think about retirement early, that healthcare conversation is important. The other place where it becomes important is maybe you have a client who is 65, ready for Medicare and ready to retire, but their spouse is 60 or younger. What are we going to do for their health care? So looking at it from that perspective is also really important and a part of the financial strategy that can't be overlooked. So just as a quick reminder, it's got to be part of the retirement income strategy. Medicare, unfortunately, isn't free. You will, if you already do claim Social Security, you'll get an enrollment for Part A. If you delay Part B or Part D, then there's going to be some enrollment penalties. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then obviously healthcare inflation has been increasing at more than twice the rate of Social Security. So this is why we see more and more concerns about the Social Security check going down. And with age often comes weaker health and increased healthcare costs. So all that is important to understand as it pertains to having a plan inside the retirement income strategy. Now, I'm sure you're all thrilled with the positive information that I've given you here, but unfortunately, it doesn't really stop there for some of your clients. So let's think about it like this. If we have two people, maybe they're neighbors, they're best friends, they do everything together, they go to the same doctors, they elect the same Medicare coverage, one gets a bill for $203 and the other gets a bill for $538. The discrimination in premium cost is always related to income. So that's where Medicare means testing and Medicare surcharges come into play. Now, this came about as the Medicare Modernization Act of 2003 was put in play and implemented in 2007. So if you take a quick snapshot of this is what it said. It basically said, hey, anybody making over $85,000 as an individual or couples making more than $170,000, congratulations, we're going to add a fee on your Medicare based on these brackets. And we'll round it out at $214 for individuals as the fifth bracket and $428 for couples. Well, fast forward to 2016, you can see that, you know what, we need a little more money. And so it appears that they decided to shrink these brackets to be able to pull in more of Mass America into the charging of these extra fees. Then fast forward to 2018. Oh, by the way, this is going okay, but let's add a sixth bracket. We want some more money from the higher income group as well. So it's just yet, as you can see, been an upgrade in these costs. Now, one thing you may notice is these numbers have never changed, right? And so there has, even though the law actually called for indexing, they never were until this year. So this is the very first year in being able to add in some sort of indexing to the bracket. Now, this appears, the delayed indexing really signaled that Medicare was not going to slow down on any of these charges, and it's probably something that we all need to be prepared for. This recent change says, okay, it might come across as maybe a breather, a sigh of relief for a little bit of middle class America, but we know that Medicare is going to have to make up any kind of loss that they would see there somewhere else. So this is a matter of just cost shifting game. So they're likely to collect that and actually impact more Americans just in a different way. But it took, again, 17 years for this inflation adjustment to happen. And so we can probably see that, you know, we can expect more of this in the future, or the more shrinking of the brackets as well. And then bracket 6, because it was just introduced, is not adjusted for inflation. So to put it in perspective, I like to show this case scenario with Johnny and June. Now, Johnny and June's a married couple. We're utilizing 2020 Medicare premium average, national average cost. If they have income of $170,000, modified adjusted gross income, at the end of the day, their Medicare Part B and D premium is $396. So again, they're under the threshold, it's $396. But let's say that we have income that is at $225. Well, the Medicare Part B and D premium is still $396, but look at where they are on the chart. We have to move them down to the third bracket, and that adds an additional $352 a month in Medicare surcharges, bringing the total to $748. That is per month. Now, many people will say, okay, that's pretty good, healthy income in retirement, but we are seeing more people in those categories, right? The other thing is that we may have started out in retirement with less than 174, but we get into retirement and an RMD situation might start bringing us and forcing us up. And then that's when we'll start seeing some Medicare surcharges often happen. So one thing we like to talk about is thinking about what are the solutions that might be able to lower the RMD later in life. So I am sure that CORE can talk to you a lot about some of our solutions, but if healthcare and long-term care is a concern, you know, we can also take qualified money out, say they're 59 and a half, do a 10 pay and get that money out, hopefully before a majority of the triggering event would happen with an RMD. So you spread that payment out, you reduce a future RMD, and you help a client protect one of their biggest risks in retirement, which is long-term care. So thinking about that as an option, because RMDs do trigger these. Something else to pay very close attention to is even when we think we have the situation solved for a married couple, unfortunately things happen, and often it's to the men, and we now have a widow situation. Well, we'll take away, say, one of the Social Security checks and bring her down to 165 for a modified adjusted gross income. Still, granted, very healthy income for a widow. Her premium dropped to 198, but we have to move her back to the individual chart, and now this poor lady is faced with Medicare surcharges that are double her actual premium amount. So her Medicare Part B and D premium becomes $586 a month. Proper planning to help avoid or protect from against this income stream is very critical in retirement. And it's important to note that while we have just discussed, you know, those that are nearing retirement may appear to be more of an affluent tax, the reality is that for those that are in the middle of their careers and that are your clients, it's really not an affluent tax. In fact, if we demonstrate here using a 40-year-old male planning to retire at age 65, and we take the current income and just add a 3% annual inflation rate until retirement, even if they only want 80% of that in retirement, you can see how their income is going to be surcharged. So even making $55,000, $70,000 a year for your clients that are in their 40s, this is the surcharges they can expect in retirement. So I think it's just really important to note that this is going to be an ongoing problem, and the earlier that you address it with solutions and opportunities in as they kind of go up the mountain and in the accumulation strategy will be very helpful. They'll be very thankful to you in retirement, because if not, they get to retirement and they're like, wait a minute, what happened? We don't have a plan to address this. So being able to have this type of conversation can be a differentiator for your practice. And what helps understand that is there are certain sources of income that clearly increase modified adjusted gross income, which is most of what our clients have: Social Security, wages, pensions, those RMDs, dividends, capital gains, IRA distributions, and muni bonds. But everything on the right does not. So it's important for future retirees to manage their investment portfolios to include products and solutions that don't fall under MAGI, and that can be life insurance and some, obviously, some other things on this list. So managing that product mix can significantly increase disposable income throughout retirement. So that's something to think about as well. So I know we've talked a lot about, gaps with Social Security and healthcare, and specifically Medicare, and all things that hopefully you're having conversations with your clients on. But the most important thing that I think is something we can't overlook is that of long-term care. And you may recall at the beginning of the presentation that we talked about people living longer. So advances in medical technology are really helping us live longer, but as access to these new technologies increases, so does the cost to use them. So longevity is that multiplier of all of our risks in retirement. And so if you recall, our metaphorical retirement mountain, as we prepared for retirement in the accumulation phase, there was a lot of things to consider. But as you enter retirement and come down the mountain, then you enter that distribution phase, and there are certain obstacles that can send you on detours or even halt your descent altogether. And those are things like, enough money to sustain a lengthy retirement and a low interest rate, policy changes, rising healthcare costs, and then, of course, having enough money to pay for that long-term care. So I think what's important is to understand the storm that's, right in front of us. It's kind of called that baby boomer tsunami. And in the next decade, the last baby boomer will turn 65. So understanding the trends around it is very important, because the number of Americans who really need long-term care is obviously going to be expected to increase. So higher demand leads to obviously a higher cost of services, and the average cost for a private room in an LTC facility in 2018 was just over $100,000. And so while many people still assume Medicare is going to cover long-term care, the reality is it doesn't cover much long-term care at all. So understanding the limitations of today's programs will really help them prepare better. So unfortunately, neither Medicare nor Medigap supplement insurance is going to protect against potentially enormous costs of long-term care. So it's very important to understand that the government really isn't in the business of the long-term care planning. And then the issue of aging doesn't really just affect one person, it affects the entire family. So most parents don't want their children putting their lives on hold to provide care. And if they did, would the care responsibilities actually be spread among children at all? And the reality is probably not, right? Many people think that informal care is, less expensive, and so that's why most people go for it. But the reality is there's a significant amount of time spent on caregiving. In fact, 30 billion hours are spent each year on informal caregiving, and that's 22 billion of those are performed with people that have full-time jobs. And so when you think about it, many people do perceive informal care as being some sort of free opportunity, but there is a huge cost connected to the sacrifices that family or friends have to make. And in fact, caregiving reduces paid work hours for women on average of around 41%. And also, when you think about the cost of health care and the overall cost to informal care, it actually exceeds the total sales for Walmart, which is about $482 billion. So it's very important. And I'm sure all of you have some sort of idea about those that are impacted by a long-term care event. And in your mind, you may be thinking about your own parent or grandparent. But the reality is that the impact of informal care is often that oldest daughter who is missing out on part of her life. So questions to consider is, to your clients is, you may never need care, but if you do, who is going to provide that care? And when they say a daughter or a niece or someone, a good follow-up is really, have you had that conversation with them? Because the reality is they probably haven't. So wouldn't we much rather put them in a category of overseeing the care versus providing the care? So we know that the graying of America is inescapable, and unfortunately, so are the costs. 7 out of 10 Americans age 65 or older will require some sort of care. And so the ability to have a long-term care expenditure on their own and cover that cost is quite difficult. So considering transferring that risk to someone else is always a great idea to explore. So the cost of long-term care depends on the type and duration of care that they need, the provider they use, and where they live, of course. But the reality is that the amount of money needed to cover long-term care is often just too far great for the average person. So let's face it, most of us would prefer to avoid thinking about the day that we can no longer take care of ourselves, or when a loved one can no longer live on their own. But acknowledging the fact that we really need long-term care is never an easy decision, but preparing now with your clients and is going to relieve a lot of that pressure and stress. And so, when you have these conversations such as, you may never need care, but if you do, what bucket of money are you going to pull from to cover the cost of care? It's important to have that conversation because they probably have a bucket of money identified. So when you look at it, this is a great way to have that reallocation conversation. By pulling a portion that was already dedicated to long-term care to begin with, and then thinking about, insulating the rest of the portfolio because we have this pulled aside and put in a bucket that can offer tremendous more value than the money itself through a long-term care solution would be very important. So when the time comes, obviously, your clients can have a peace of mind in knowing that they've made a wise decision for them or a loved one. So just a recap, Medicare doesn't cover custodial care. Programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Veteran Services can help only in a very few circumstances. When you're looking at Medicaid, that means someone else is paying. That means federal law is going to recover the money spent from the estate. Certainly, we already know about the emotional toll in addition to the financial toll. And LTC protection can certainly help clients access the care that they want to receive wherever they need it. And so that's something to remember as well. So always think about closing the gaps and removing those risks and having the conversations to alleviate the chance that they might run out of money. Make sure you understand how to optimize Social Security, how to pay for health care and Medicare, and of course, protect the income and the wishes of your clients should an LTC event occur. So I actually am done and had 10 minutes to spare. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. But these are if you can start framing some of the conversations, sometimes it's hard to call somebody up and say, hey, let's have a long-term care conversation. But if we can frame that differently and say, let's talk about how we can optimize income in retirement and reduce your expenses of healthcare, like optimizing Social Security and figuring out how to plan for healthcare. It's a natural progression into, okay, now let's look at a bigger ticket item like long-term care. So being able to segue from one to the other, I think, is a good transition opportunity and a great way to forge a conversation that may have been difficult to open up before.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Mostly the questions are a lot of commentary. They're mostly just positive feedback, and everybody is loving the presentation. So my notes would be that I'll be sending out the recording, and then Tammy, if you want to email me any supporting documents that you have that you feel would be helpful, we can include that, and I'll put a link out to everyone who's been on the call and anyone who missed the call, so that if you have someone in your office, you can share the webinar with them. There will be a link so you can have them watch this. But other than that, I think I don't see any formal questions other than just lots of compliments. So thank you so much, Tammy.
All right, very good. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Everybody have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.